This morning, I wanted to do a brief introduction of myself through some presentations to show you how I got involved in education. But in particular, I want to talk through some audio visuals and so forth. My Eyewitness account of global warming. I've traveled in the Arctic for over 40 years. Scientists told us in the mid-90s that first changes would be in the polar regions. But since these areas are so isolated, very few people have seen these changes. But I've seen pretty much everything on the North Pole, Antarctica, and so forth. So I think to set the tone of the conference, I'd like to show that, to show you the reality and the seriousness of what's going on, invisibly as we're speaking here. But first, I want to talk a little bit about my life as an adventurer. I really have everything to thank to my parents as a young child. I belonged to a big family, 9 kids. We were given pretty much total freedom when we were young. And we had a couple of rules. We had to stay out of trouble with the law. We had to have a certain grade point average. And then if we wanted to do something, we had to figure it out and pay for it ourselves. My dad was an entrepreneur. That's how he raised 9 kids. And with that freedom, I was able to follow really what was in my heart. I was also very fortunate as a young kid, because I always had a clear vision of where I wanted to go in my life. I wanted to be a teacher. I never had a question my direction of what I was doing. That was my path. I didn't necessarily see myself as a young kid as a school teacher. I didn't know for sure how that would play out, but I knew education was my vocation. And like most young kids, I had this incredible thirst for adventure and so forth, which I was able to pursue because of the freedom that I was given. I started climbing when I was 16 years old. Actually, my first expedition was, I took a motorboat down the Mississippi River when I was 15 from Minneapolis to New Orleans and back. I recruited my older brother who was 17. That was my first and last motorized adventure, mainly because it cost the gas, and I was more interested in climbing and kayaking. But as a kid in the 1960s, in the late 50s, interested in climbing in Minnesota. Where's the mountains? Where's the gear and all the climbing rope? Where's, Patagonia wasn't even there, and the North Face. So what I did was I checked a book out of the library called Mountaineering Freedom of the Hills. That taught me the basic ropes. I bought a hemp rope in a hardware store. And then we went to the cliffs on Lake Superior. And first we started doing traverses like this, and then we got more into the rock climbing portion of it. And when I was 17, I had a driver's license, so that enabled me to travel out west, where I got into with better climbers, more experience, better ropes for sure. And but I was intent about climbing in the big mountains. Rock climbing to me was a skill. It's almost like learning a language in order to learn culture. So I learned the rock climbing. That was really the basic part of it. And of course, as a kid from Minnesota, rock is what we did have. We didn't have any bigger mountains. And then I did the overhangs and the big cliffs in Colorado. And eventually, by the time I was 18, I was in the higher mountains in British Columbia. And I ended up doing some real major climbs when I was 20 years old in the Peruvian Andes, and the snow and ice is where I really wanted to. I was always fascinated by major adventure. National Geographic was really key to me, because some of us grew up here in the 50s and 60s. There wasn't the Discovery Channel or the National Geographic Channel. The National Geographic magazine was probably the only places where you could get the images in which to wrap your dreams around. And this is in the Peruvian Andes in South America. I got in with a very good team of climbers. I was still learning at that time. We did a first ascent on this mountain here at 20,600. Another first ascent here, actually a wall in the back of this mountain, 20,000. The one we're standing on is 20,600 that we did a first ascent. I was also, as a Minnesota kid, of course, our natural affinity is water, rivers, and canoeing, and so forth. That was natural to me. But I took up kayaking, which in the very early 60s, again, I never saw a kayak in Minnesota during this era. We got these collapsible boats from Germany called Klepper kayaks. These enabled us to collapse the boats and then ship them up far north. My first trip was when I was 17. I went up the kayak with a friend of mine up the Inside Passage to Alaska. And then we crossed the mountains, got to the headwaters of the Yukon, and then paddled down the river to the Arctic Circle. This is when I was 19, we left Jasper, Alberta, in the southern Canadian Rockies, just north of Calgary a little bit. We kayaked 3,000 miles actually on this expedition. And this expedition actually was a coming of age to me, and actually my partner. We both later bought property in the wilderness and moved out. Again, kayaking entailed a lot of skills that we practiced on the rivers of Minnesota, especially cold water. Because when you're in the high Arctic kayaking, if you tip over in cold water, you're 300 miles from the nearest, whatever it might be, a village or a Hudson Bay post, and you lose your boat, well, you know, you literally have a paddle. So they're up a creek here. So the skills were always something that was very important. And you know, like we're the same, but kids especially, if they have an interest in doing something, as teachers, you know, our first challenge is to get the curiosity. Basically, once you get the curiosity of the student, the content is all downhill. It's very easy. And I was very typical of that as a kid. I had the curiosity and I was willing to learn whatever it took to do what interests me. When I graduated from college in 1967, I talked to a friend of mine who sat next to me in a philosophy course, hitchhiking as far north as we could go into Canada, where we ran out of roads. We built this raft on a small river, floated into the Mackenzie River, which is much larger, and floated to the Arctic Ocean. And then from there we brought the small rubber life rafts. In the Arctic Ocean there's no trees, so you can't make a raft to get home. So we went over the mountains with these little rafts and then floated down into Alaska and hitchhiked back. That influenced me to buy property in the wilderness area, the Balmy Waters canoe area, Ely, Minnesota, which is just on the Canadian border. At age 19, I bought property on this lake here. I didn't want to live on the road. I thought the ideal situation would be 3 miles from the nearest road. In this case, it was a 2-mile paddle here at Portage, and then across the small lake here, where I built this cabin. Now, I was a city kid from Minneapolis. In our house, you're lucky to find a pliers or a hammer. Again, I had the innate interest. I saw a lot of log cabins. Cabin building is not that hard. You know, it's log on log. I checked a couple of books out of the library and started learning how to do log cabins. I still live here to this day. I have solar, wind. I heat with wood, water from the lake. We raise a lot of our own food, vegetables in the garden. So I've always been on this very similar track here, but we call it now sustainability. Of course, when you're living off the roads, you're relying on the help of a lot of friends. Everything has to be literally carried from place to place. When you cut a tree down, you don't have a machine that picks it up and brings it in place. So I had a lot of really great friends. Didn't wear out too many of them. In fact, most of these people here, this is like almost 35 years ago, are still close friends. Thanks to the internet, we're still connected. Then we made gardens in Ely in the very early 70s. Ely is a colder climate, but yet gardens grow very well. With the gardens, we have an ice house for refrigeration, wood cellars, keep everything from freezing during the winter time. It was really the dogs that changed my life up in Ely. I taught school for 3 years. I got a master's in education. My undergraduate was geology, biology with a teaching certificate, which enabled me to teach. And then during my 3 years of teaching, I received my master's in education. I actually taught global warming in my classes in the late 60s. But then at age 25, as I originally had planned, when I had my credentials behind me, I moved to the wilderness. And there you have a couple of challenges of how do you make a living, and how about your social life. As a young kid, living in the wilderness. So the dogs really solved that. But the dogs enabled me to bring in supplies, but I started off at winter school using dog sleds and skis to bring people into the wilderness. And gradually I got a really strong team together, which enabled me in a few years after that to start traveling in the Arctic. But it was the winter courses, which I ran for 10 years. I literally lived outside in northern Minnesota in the 70s and early 80s from mid-December until April 1st. Running groups. This is a medical intern course from St. Mary's Hospital. I worked with J-terms, men's and women's courses. I did a whole collage of different courses. And it was really a great social event. I met a lot of friends, a lot of fellow educators that brought up courses. And that then led me to the Arctic. In the late 70s, I started branching out to the Arctic. And then from there, the last 25 years, I made a career as a polar explorer and as an educator. But I wanted to take you on an expedition here to give you an idea of what the polar regions looks like. This was a team that I put together 20 years ago called the International Trans-Antarctica Team. We were six people from 6 different countries. We have 2 polar scientists, glaciologists on board. Dr. Chin Dabo here. Dabo was the co-chair of the IPCC. He won the Nobel Peace Prize 3 years ago for the work that he's done, his dedication to glaciology and climate. Another well-known glaciologist, Dr. Viktor Boyarsky from St. Petersburg, Russia. He was with the Arctic Research at that time in the Soviet Union. My partner was Dr. Jean-Louis Etienne from Paris, France. Jean-Louis and I met on the way to the North Pole 3 years before that. Jean-Louis was a French physician. Also, he was a sailor and a polar explorer. Jeff Summers was from the British Antarctic Survey, which was Britain's scientific arm of study in Antarctica. Jeffrey was in charge of the dogs for British Antarctic Survey at the peninsula in the base of Rotherhithe in the 1980s. This is before they used snowmobiles for support. The Brits used to use dogs to support their science. And then Keizo Fanatsu, another really well-qualified person in dogs and mountain climbing from Japan, along with a couple dogs, which I'll introduce in just a few minutes. This was our route. We took, to get an idea of where we are, the starting point here is the northernmost tip of the Antarctic Peninsula. Chile and Argentina, the southernmost tip, are about 400 miles north of here. So you have South America, the Drake Passage, and then Antarctica. I purposely took the longest possible route because that's normally the way I do things. It takes so much energy to do an expedition, you might as well do something that's really, we're going to really learn from. One of my purposes of always of expedition was exploring and learning, and I felt the only way of really truly learning about Antarctica was to really take almost a 4,000-mile route across. We left in July, I think it was July 26th, '89. We crossed, it took us 30 days to cross the Larsen ice shelf, which I'll give you more details on that later. We had 60-day storms through these mountains, just incredible storms that never let off. As we got more into the interior, we distanced ourselves from that type of weather, got to high elevation, extremely cold weather. We made the pole December 12th, '89. We crossed this area called the area of inaccessibility. No one had ever traveled in this area. It was actually human experience that had never been in this area until we crossed it. It was just nothing but a real high, cold plateau. And then 222 days later, on March 3rd, we made it to the Russian base at Murray. Now, prior to this expedition, there were only 13 men that entered into the interior in the Scott Emerson and Mawson expeditions, and only 6 of those returned. Which is a good statement of what the real weather was. I mean, we were very fortunate because we were organized, we had a great team. I think we had a lot of prayers, good wishes, and providence behind us. But we were very, of course, very humble when we thought we were humble before, but we were very humble when we finished this trip. Geographically, Antarctica is divided into 2 large areas. One is the eastern Antarctic Plateau. It's this huge plateau. It's almost 3,000 miles across here. The ice is up to 14,000 feet thick. Ice is almost probably close to 1 million years old. This area, because it's so large, and it contains about 70% of the world's fresh water, it creates its own weather system that basically, until now, has protected it from global warming. So on the plateau, global warming has really very minimal, if any, effect. But it's not opposite on the coastline. But Western Antarctica, which is this ice sheet here, is another story. Western Antarctica, I have another picture of it here, is, this would be the east here. This is Western Antarctica, this area I'm talking about. It's 1,000 miles across here to get an idea of distances. Western Antarctica is surrounded by ice shelves. You have, first of all, an ice cap. Ice cap is ice on land, which is the Western Antarctic ice sheet or ice cap. That's on land. The ice shelves are on water. What's happening here is you have these massive amount of ice. They're called ice streams. The glaciers are like small compared to these. Ice streams are up to 100, 150 miles wide, and they're hundreds and hundreds of miles long. Well, these glaciers and ice sheets, they flow down to the ice shelf, and they literally flow over the ocean. They cap the ocean. And this ice flows right over the ocean here at Ross Ice Shelf here. It's about the size of France. It's over 1,000 feet thick, but underneath that is very deep ocean. So Western Antarctica is surrounded by ice sheets. It doesn't show ice shelves, I'm sorry. The ice shelves doesn't show the ice shelves on this side, but these buttress against the continent. And the key here is they keep the glaciers intact, in place. It's almost like when you take a wine bottle and you turn it upside down with a cork, the wine doesn't go anywhere because you got a cork in it, right? You pull the cork out, the wine's on the floor. Well, this is the problem that we have with the ice shelves, is because they're right close to sea level, 60, 70 feet high, and also they're affected by ocean currents. They have a tendency now starting to break up. Any slight changes within the climate will have a tendency of breaking these up. And when they break up, you then get a massive surge of ice into the ocean, and this is what we now are seeing happening. We see a rise of sea level. I'm going to show you the details here on the Larsen a little bit, but I have another diagram, sort of a cross-section of this whole thing. This is the Western Antarctic ice sheet. You start with open ocean way out in the distance, evaporation. The moisture falls, of course, in the state of snow, forms glaciers and ice sheets that flow down to the ocean. And also here, this would be the ice shelf right here. It flows out. And the natural process is as it flows out away in the distance, it'll break off into these large tabular icebergs. The problem now is that with climate change, these are breaking off right close to the ocean. And the ice behind it that holds in is starting to move them real rapidly. I'm going to show you here more detail here of the Larsen ice shelf in this area. And here we have, distance-wise, you can tell 350 miles from the north to south here. On the left-hand side in the west, we have a mountain range right here. And then this is the Larsen B ice shelf. It's that flat area. There's a mountain range that's extended, and then the larger Larsen B ice shelf in this region. It took us 30 days to cross the Larsen A and B. Both of these ice shelves now are gone. I wanted to show you, I have a couple-minute, 5-minute video here to show you more firsthand of what it's like, what the Larsen looks like, and what it's like to travel like this. It starts off with we're flying in by a plane here to set up our first camp. And as we fly in, we're looking at the Larsen ice shelf. This first minute or so does not have sound, so I'll just narrate over it. We're traveling with the twin arm. This is the Larsen here. We're looking at the ice walls here about 100 feet high. It goes down another 700 feet into the water. This, as far as I know, is the only video ever made of the Larsen ice shelf. Actually, historical, because as mentioned, the ice shelf is not around anymore. The scientists believe that this ice shelf was set down about 12,000 years ago during the last ice age. So what that means is that Larsen has, it's still getting warming. We've always had warming and cooling stage until just recently, until it broke up. But this is the beginning with expedition. You get an idea here. The dogs here, the firm control. We breed the dogs for that type of. This is how we travel. 10 dogs per sleds. Sleds weigh, in this case, at the beginning, about 1,200 pounds. And moving at a very fast clip. The dogs are special breed of dogs from an Eskimo breed, other northern breeds. You can notice that the hair of this dog, their ideal temperatures are 30, 40 below. So they are really bred for the cold weather. And this is the environment that they really excel in. We put a lot of love and attention into the dogs. You can tell just by the behavior of this dog. They're very well socially adapted. They love people. They love the cold. And you need this type of love and affection in order to get the end result of having the dogs really well. And above all, they like the snow. And this is the Larsen A ice shelf. We're still in the polar night here. This is the ice shelf here is about 700 feet deep. We have about 6 hours of perpetual twilight, and the sun goes down for another 16, 18 hours. At the beginning here, the polar night, the twilight, it's very calm, extremely beautiful. we're moving up into crevasse country right here. Now, we're always traveling on skis. We never ride this sled. And in fact, there's not even a place to ride if you wanted to. But there's 2 people per sled, 10 dogs, and then 3 sleds here that we see. And we're moving up mountain range here. The crevasses were a real danger. The crevasses only occurred where the glaciers went up and down. It was really the cold weather. We had, typically wind chills 70 to 100 below was a normal day because of the strong winds. And this is our half-an-hour lunch break, which for me was the hardest time of the day because you're not moving. My partner, Jean-Louis Etienne, is a diplomat actually. He was able to get the full support of the Soviet Union and also China back during the Cold War. And myself, I was in charge of putting the expedition together, training the people, the dogs, the logistical part, and then the combined effort of us, we were able to do this expedition. This is in a very dangerous crevasse area. We put these orange blankets underneath the dog's harnesses, so if they fall in a crevasse, they won't fall out of the harness. They're roped in, so I'm hooking them up here, so they're safe as long as they don't fall out. And I'm in a climbing gear here, right here at this point. And this is a real dangerous situation, a dog in a crevasse. Finger and I are not roped up. We're trying to get this dog out, and he's struggling. We're trying to calm him down a little bit so he doesn't fall out of his harness. A little excitement. We didn't lose any dogs in the crevasse, but mainly because of our experience. And this is on the Larsen B ice shelf. It's about 45 below here, but the wind's not blowing. You can hear the dogs here. And this is pretty much what it was like from day to day. This is actually a good day because we can see all 3 sleds. But Victor would ski a Fred in front of the dogs. The dogs work best if they have something in front to follow. And it's hard to do commands when the wind is blowing. But we're traveling along. The wind chill here is probably 60, 70 below. And dogs are tracking at a pretty good pace. And this is the area of inaccessibility, the area that had never been experienced by human beings. This is our normal pace. We do a 10-hour day and 10 days straight, 1 day off. And that was a pace that we could maintain. In fact, when we crossed the plateau, we maintained that pace for 4 months. And but always constantly moving. You really had to make time on here because the second winter was really in our heels. And this is on the plateau here. It's really an incredible way of traveling and seeing the various scenery here. And I have another picture here coming up. This again is, I just wanted to show you, the landing pictures are by the ice shelf was here. The twilight picture was in this area. The dog in the crevasse is right here. And then the windy shots were in here. So this was the the Larsen. I'm going to show you a larger view of this area here by satellite. And this is January 31st, as you can see on your upper right, 2002. This is the mountain range of the Dogger Pass. Notice the Larsen A ice shelf is gone. That broke up in various sections in 1998. And we're going to look at a closer view of this. This took us 15 days to cross the square here. And this is before the collapse happened. We're looking at here open ocean. It's a little over 100 miles from the ocean to the land. These ice shelves also are a buffer between the warmer ocean and the colder land. So when these break up, the ocean ends up really close to the land, and then you get more rain instead of snow. What we're seeing here is the darker areas are lakes and long lakes, round lakes, and so forth, which is very unusual because what the climate scientists or the glaciologists say the breakup of an ice shelf or an ice cap is a wet event. It really takes water to make this whole thing, and they weren't really aware of it at this time. But you have a condition where, probably for the first time in 12,000 years, tremendous amount of water on that ice. And that water then went through the ice, and that changed the structure of the ice. In northern Minnesota, where I come from, ice fishing is really common in December on. And if you have 10 inches of solid ice, you can drive a truck on it. But if that ice gets wet, you'll fall right through. Even a snowmobile, if it sits, will fall. Well, this is what happened on a planetary scale. That changed the structure. And then, right after around February 1st, we had the first collapse on the southern side. And then this followed by a continual collapse. Some of these icebergs here are the size of small New England states. And within 4 weeks, this entire ice shelf collapsed into the ocean. It was one breakup after another breakup. And this is when, it's gone. I mean, I never forget, about 2 weeks later, I was reading in the 10th page of the Minneapolis Star and Tribune. It says, Larsen B ice shelf disintegrates. That's when I really saw that was a wake-up call. And what was really concerning about this is it caught the ice scientists totally off guard. Up until that time, they didn't think an ice shelf could totally break up. And we're seeing this more and more. Conservative scientists, scientists by their nature are conservative, and they're seeing something, and I'll show you the Arctic Ocean breakup. Suddenly something happens and everybody's really shocked by it. Well, what does this Larsen breakup mean? Well, the ice shelf is floating in the ocean, so the sea level is not going to rise any. But in this way, these are some of the longest glaciers in the world. These are moving at a very quick rate now, dumping a tremendous amount of ice in the ocean. Now, if we lost the Ross ice shelf, that first big one, it would be catastrophic for our civilization. We'd have a rapid sea level rise. And scientists have dug down in the muds below the Ross ice shelf, got climate records for several million years, and sure enough, the Larsen ice shelf at certain times have suddenly broke up. And what they believe broke up was equivalent to a 2 degrees centigrade rise in temperature from pre-industrial age. So we're moving rapidly in that. A quick video here. To be on the front lines of global warming, you're usually in a dog sled or it might be a kayak. But this is now the Larsen B ice shelf when it's opened up. This is 3 years ago. We returned back where we dog sledded by kayak. And it just shows you a breakup of this glacier, of this iceberg. Icebergs break up all the time. But what is real obvious when you're there is the amount of breakup, amount of ice that's breaking. But this will give you an idea of what, some of the things that we see. Greenland ice cap is actually the second largest ice cap in the world. You have the eastern Antarctica, Greenland, then the western Antarctica. Now, Greenland's a real problem because it's in the northern hemisphere, and because the northern is warming much faster than the southern, we're seeing great changes. I crossed Greenland from unsupported with my team, Antarctic team, the year before we did that trip as a training. We traveled 1,600 miles here. This is at 10,000 feet. You really almost have to travel foot after foot after foot to get an idea of just how massive these areas are. And then when you see the collapse and the changes, it gives you a global perspective of the seriousness of it. This is the map of Antarctica, or Greenland, 1992. We're looking at, in the red areas, that is the summer thaw areas. In other words, in July and August in 1992, the thawing levels went maybe up to 800 feet, which is pretty normal. 92, if you may remember back that far, that was the cool summer. We had the volcanic eruption in the Philippines at that time. And that would be almost like a normal summer what we would have had 100 years ago. So the normal summer would be just a slight thawing. Now you can see the acceleration of this. In 2002, the thawing levels now are up over 4,000 feet. And notice it's 3 years later how this is moving quickly. It's up to 6,000 feet in 2002. And last year, this summer, I believe, was a record year. It was up in some areas up to almost 8,000 where we're having a thaw. Now, what does that mean? Well, it doesn't mean that an ice cap 10,000 feet is going to melt off in a straight, short summertime. But again, it's water. Remembering that the breakup of an ice cap or an ice shelf is a wet event. It's a tremendous amount of water now that's melting down. It's equivalent to the amount of water that flows out of the Amazon now. Is melting in the summer. And that forms, when the water melts, it first collects in lakes. The lakes either overflow or they flow down through the surface. They flow down in the rivers. The rivers flow for a short period of time, and then the problem is the rivers go down through the ice, and that lubricates the bottom of the glacier. That's the key here. This water is flowing out at the bottom of the ice cap. And then that has a tendency, when you're on the shoreline, it's this massive surging. I have a video here I took off the internet to show you that this illustrates it quite well. This would be the Greenland. Notice the lake here forming, and then you'll have the water lubricating the bottom, as you notice here, and that causes the ice to slow, to slide. Notice here, here's the danger part. Notice this stuff coming down. It's not just the immediate flow of the surge. It causes then the surging from the ice, and you have a tremendous amount of flow down. Now, I wanted to see this firsthand, so 2 years ago in 2008, I organized a kite skiing expedition across Greenland by kites during the summertime in order to see firsthand. Now, this is kites you fly in the air about 125 feet, large kites. We're on skis. It's really quite a thrill here, and it's also, notice that helmet is mandatory, because if you fall at these speeds, it's memorable, or maybe not so memorable. And so you have to be well prepared. I was learning, my other 3 teammates were in their early 20s, and they were the top boulder kiters in the world. I was just learning the art here. So we were training right on the east side of Greenland. We went from east to west to start on the expedition. You can travel a long distances. You're traveling sometimes 15, 20 miles an hour. You're not in the air. The idea is you don't want to go in the air, but in strong winds, you have to control the energy of the kite, and then in lighter winds, you have to really work the kite in such a way that it can go. But it's a real amazing way of traveling. We can travel 100 miles in a session. When the wind was blowing, we traveled straight 24 to 36 hours, 2-hour breaks. But we were able to travel up to 2 months, over 2,000 miles, totally unsupported. So it's much faster. You don't have the safety factor that you do on the dry sled. But this is July 15, 2008, 6,700 feet up. We're over a mile up, and we're hitting open water. And this is probably the first time that this has ever happened in the history of the ice cap. Looking at history over a couple 100,000 years. And it's just really eerie all of a sudden seeing where you're supposed to see constant ice. And then you hear running water at this elevation because you don't hear sound of it on an ice cap. We were eventually stopped at 5,000 feet because we couldn't hear We couldn't cross. Listen to the sound. You never hear this. This is a sound of a real pretty sound. There is a major problem here. Is when we flew out here. Notice this river is 3/4 of a mile wide. Notice it totally disappears. It goes down. Another river. This one is a huge volume, very deep river, 1/4 mile wide. We followed this for several miles. We're in the air about 3,000 feet above here in the Twin Otter. And this one went through the ice. But it wasn't until we got on the coastline that we saw really what was happening here in Greenland. And this is called calving. Calving is a normal event. When glaciers hit the seashore, they calve off. But what's abnormal is the amount of ice and the amount of calving. You're sitting on the shoreline here, this was going constantly. This is like a 20-story building, it's almost a half a mile wide here that you're seeing. This is a planetary, almost event. And what you're seeing here is the beginning of the Great Sea Level rise. This is global warming. Global warming is causing our ice to melt, and also the flowing, as I talked about, and a sea level change. And unfortunately, this is an people area. I mean, if I could get half of our Senate and Congress and sit around and have a little picnic lunch here, get them out of their noose and everything. And we really see some changes here because this is quite serious. This is something that's going to be a daunting challenge for the young people that we're going to see major changes in our life, but it's all going to fall in the lap of our students and their children. This is caused basically by the burning of fossil fuels. We release the carbon dioxide, which is a heat-trapping gas, which accumulates in the atmosphere. 50% of this CO2 stays in the atmosphere for over 100 years. Some of it sticks around for 1,000 years. So the solutions, which I'll talk about at the end, is really moving into the cleaner energy economy. I want to move on here to show you a little bit more. I have one more video here taken by Jim Baylog. This is a Hillside Glacier, largest glacier by far in the northern hemisphere. What we're looking at, Jim flies into these areas and leaves cameras for a year at a time. They do a time-lapse photography, so he can actually see the changes. This is a glacier. There will be a size comparison at the end here. I'll give you a better size comparison. But what we're seeing here is 3 miles across here, and it's a mile deep. And if you remember that iceberg, the calving that I just showed you, a calving event would be less than the size of this little piece here to get an idea. But this is a time lapse from one of Jim's cameras. This is taken over like a 70-75 minute period. This is a little over an hour, the same time that I'm talking to you here, where we had this incredible collapse. Notice this next one coming up this one is like 3 miles across that you're going to see here. Notice this volume of ice going in. I mean, I like to refer to the sound of this as it went. This, goes on all the time in the summertime, with no one around to witness it. We'll zoom back here and then show a size comparison of exactly what you saw here. Key thing here, just a little over an hour. Mile retreat of a glacier. Glaciers seldom retreat, 3 miles wide. You get an idea here of the volume of this, what's going on. I want to move on just quickly to the Arctic Ocean. The Arctic Ocean is about the size of the United States and Mexico put together. It's a big, deep ocean basin. It's this whiter area here, the pack ice. The North Pole is right here. I have a couple of slides here I want to show you of what the Arctic Ocean looks like. We crossed in '95 from Russia here to the pole down. And there's 2 dominant features on the Arctic Ocean. It's a thin layer of ice. It used to be a little over 8 feet during the colder era 20 years ago. Now it's under 5 feet thick, but it's in constant motion, driven mainly by wind. In some areas, it's like giant titanic plates that come together. In some areas where they come together, it forms shear zones where the ice is really piled up. And we're trying to figure out here a route around that. Within the shear zones, then, you have large pressure ridges. Some of these bridges are as tall as the room here. Now you have to negotiate a heavy sled around. And then another feature is this ice will come apart, forming what's called leads, open water. Even in the coldest times of the year, even in the coldest epoch, 100 years ago, open water is common. It's part of the situation, even in winter. But with the normal cold winter, this ice would normally freeze quickly, which would enable you then to travel on this moving surface. But in the 90s is when we start seeing a major change in the Arctic Ocean, in that we had lots of open water. Some of this open water in 95, we couldn't actually see to the other end. We then have to find a route over it. As an explorer, it's changing the whole terrain because it's now very dangerous to travel. Even in 95 here, we're putting sleds through a lot. Right now, the only way you can get to the pole is by using flotation. I think the days of just dog sledding without flotation are over. All explorers use, as I mentioned, some form of flotation. In 95, since it was such a long trip, we knew we were coming down in July in northern Canada. And there, the summer would be setting in, we would have open water. So in mid-June, we flew the plane came in, flew the dogs out, and we continued with the canoe sleds like this. Now, this is the Arctic Ocean, which is just, this picture to me is really strange because never in my wildest dreams would I ever think I'd be canoeing on the Arctic Ocean, because that's where Harry and all the explorers traveled by dog team. It was an area of perpetual cold and perpetual ice. And now, in the summertime, we have 50% of this is open up like this. The surface of the Arctic Ocean now is really key here in our energy balance. We have a 24-hour sun in the summer for over 5 months in the polar region. So that's a lot of solar energy that's striking the top. And up until 20 years ago, the majority of that energy in the summertime would be reflected off because most of the surface, over 90% of the Arctic Ocean, even in the summer, was ice. So you had this reflective area, and all that energy reflected off. And that maintained our heat balance in the globe. As we have an excessive amount of heat in the tropical areas and the colder areas in the polar regions. And then this was balanced off by ocean currents. But this is all changing. Just to give you an idea, in 79 here, the changes. 1979 was the average amount of ice in the summer. Notice this big breakup here in 07. And just to illustrate here what's going on, the top view would have been 20 years ago when, as I mentioned, the majority of the energy hitting the ice in the summer is reflected. This would be in the 90s when we start getting darker surfaces exposed. Once you get darker surfaces, it's a domino effect. More energy is absorbed, more ice is melted, and it's continuous. And this was in 2007, 3 years ago. We have this unexpected breakup of the Arctic Ocean in the summer. Over 50% of the sea ice broke up. Most of this ice broke up was what's called multi-year ice. It's ice that's been around for at least a decade. That's the breeding ice of the Arctic Ocean. A lot of that broke up. And then when it freezes again, we have thin ice, and then the next summer it breaks up real quickly. So the cycle is a vicious cycle. This is where we're rapidly heading. The U.S. and Norwegian navies are planning a 4-month sea route over the top of the globe here for 2013, and hopefully they're a little too early on their planning on this. But the sea route is not going to be the Northwest Passage as we always talked about. The sea route is going to go right over the top, and that of course exposes more petroleum puts more energy in. It's a downward cycle. Just to move quickly here. This is the permafrost. This is the wild card. The permafrost is a huge area. I believe it's about 3 million square miles in the northern hemisphere. Permafrost in the winter, it's hard to tell between the land and the lakes and so forth, but it's real obvious in the short summer. You get this thin layer of mosses and nice beautiful flowers, but if you were to dig down where the dogs are, you would hit permafrost, frozen ground, about a foot down depending on your area. This is the area here of permafrost. Of course, Greenland is all ice cap, but this is the area here. The permafrost now has been thawing, of course, as the seasons become earlier. It's been thawing, as you would expect, from the south up. But starting in 07, when we had the breakup of the Arctic Ocean, with more heat now going into the heat balance system in the globe. We're starting to see the permafrost thawing now from the north, from the very far north, which to me is extremely scary. It releases methane into the atmosphere. Methane is 22 times more dangerous than greenhouse gas and CO2. And of course, we have structural problems like in Alaska with permafrost. We have an incredible environmental challenge here. We're looking at mass extinction of at least 50% of our species if we don't stop this soon. The bear, of course, relies on ice for hunting, and that too will be a victim here. The bear is on thin ice in the Inuit and Eskimo culture. The bear and the human beings at the same level. Is what happens to the bear, you know, say it happens to the human being. It's very true, but there's one big difference. So the bear has no control over its environment. We have control over the environment. And we know what the problem is. It's the carbon dioxide. And we know what the solutions are. The solutions are moving, eliminate as quickly as possible the CO2 and move into the clean energy economy, which I'm just going to talk briefly about. I just want to take one quick slide here. The question I always get from the public is, isn't this a natural occurrence? And for an average person in the public that's confused with the media, especially very confused by the big dog campaign that the fossil fuels companies project on us, it is hard to understand. But if you look at the 400, this is from the ice core from Antarctica, which shows the natural rise and fall of CO2. You notice that the bottom level is 180, top level is 280. The natural up and down is 100 parts per million up and down. This is a natural up and down caused mainly by the variation of the orbit of the Earth, which causes the ice ages and the warmer ages. But then when you see this here, the sudden rise, I believe we're 390 parts per million right now. The sudden rise now, it isn't rocket science to understand this. This is the rise of CO2, so we know this is really a fingerprint. I just want to talk, I don't want to leave it dangling here with the doomsday report, but it is extremely serious. I'm optimistic because the solutions are economic. I mean, we have a three-pronged problem here. We have a serious climate issue, we have an economic issue that we all face daily, and we have a national security issue because we rely on foreign oil, particularly the Middle East, Venezuela, our friends in Nigeria, for our energy, for our economy. Our economy depends on that oil. The solutions to all this is building a new clean energy economy. The clean energy economy, for example, Minnesota does not have a drop of oil, a chunk of coal. All of our energy money goes outside of the state. But we're endowed with natural resources, from wind to solar to geothermal to clean biofuels like grasses and so forth. If we move into the clean energy economy in the future, all our energy can come from our own sources. I mean, I can't think of anything more patriotic than having our country as self-reliant energy. It's really that simple. I mean, we can educate and talk blue in our face, but because of the media, and especially the Dow campaign that the fossil fuel companies have put $100 million a year into this, and that's all documented if you ever want to look at the web. That's a hard thing to do. It's the same campaign they waged in tobacco, some of you remember, in the 60s and 70s. And their main strategy is put doubt in the science, undermine science, undermine science. Don't prove anything, just doubt the science. So it's really difficult, but we have to continue on that. But it's the economic is what's going to pull this over. And so I'm confident that way, but we are still going to have to adapt. Time has basically run out for us. We have to move on this fast. Unfortunately, we don't even have a climate policy right now, but we all like, exploring. You're up against daunting odds many times. But the main thing is to work together on this. What I'm seeing, I can talk for the Minnesota Midwest, is that around global warming solutions, it's really engaging our communities. Youth, old age, the whole communities are really getting together around this. It's a real social engagement. But education, above all, is a real commitment that we all have, and we all have to continue. And my commitment to education is through Will Steger Foundation. Kristen is, we have an exhibit here right out front the front door if you want to find out more about the projects that we're doing and maybe ways that we can collaborate. Kristen can talk to you about that. She'll be here all day. I'll be here at the end of the session here for 10 minutes. have a few books to sign if people want to come up and talk, or talk individually. We may have room for maybe 1 or 2 questions. I think I'm getting almost the 1 minute sign, but maybe we did 1 or 2 questions, and then I'll turn it over to the break. So is there anybody?
The first question will come from some of our students, and they're back at that table. Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, my name is Kevin. I'm from Thomas Jefferson High School. It's right outside DC. And I actually had a question on how your sensory experience shaped how you view climate policy. And do you think that people are starting to get the message that we're doing enough right now, and that we're taking a right direction as it seems right now in terms of climate policy? Are we heading in the right direction?
Yeah, in climate policy, in our country, first of all, we're way behind the 8 ball here. I was at Copenhagen. I took a delegation of 12 youth from the Midwest. Europe has been on board of this, and they're grabbing the economy. China is going to be a real competitor, Japan. So we're sort of the lone wolf here because of our politics. The reason we don't have, we didn't get a climate agreement in Copenhagen is because of the U.S. Senate. The U.S. Senate is basically holding the whole world up on this. So it's really, right now, it's in the hand, unfortunately, of the politicians that we all need to be involved with. But I'll tell you though, I work a lot with, Kevin, with your generation, not just in K-12 education, but in climate activists, where we're out, in a very organized way. It's very important, I think, for all of us, first of all, to be tolerant of other viewpoints, because we're this politically charged atmosphere, and it's easy to start slugging it out. What we're lacking really is communication. But I think it's real important for your generation not only to educate yourself, but to get involved on the political end. And what really helps were the adults and industry, and not just politicians. If you come in there organized and very thoughtful and very respectful, and if you're coming in there because you're really concerned about you tell adult, I'm concerned about my generation, the doors will open, and it's very important. You'll get open communication that way. So in fact, you have access, you're very fortunate here, because you have access directly to Washington communications. So I would recommend, highly advise you to get organized. There's a lot of great groups out there on the web, and there's probably some in your own school. And as a youth too, it's a social event. The organization around this is extremely social, person to person. But to be tolerant, to be educated, and approach adults and politicians in a very thoughtful way. And have an agenda when you come in there. That's what's really helping us to move it. Because they're not taking, really, the politicians are not taking your generation into consideration at all. In our climate policy, they're just totally bewildered of what this means to your generation. So it's extremely important that you get active out there and take this one on. And one last question.
Thank you. My name is Jim Sirak. I'm a high school teacher from New Jersey, and we've recently had a couple of courses on climate change, and with outside speakers. One question my students always ask is, why aren't the scientists being more activists about this? And so what I wanted to ask you is if you think that the scientific community needs to be more activists, whether they should just be making more recommendations about policy and about how the data need to be interpreted rather than just being so objective.
Yeah, the real problem here is, as I mentioned, scientists are conservative mainly in their own field, and I think by take a poll, there's probably more conservative than liberal if we look at politicians, the political thing of science. But the average scientist, though, is a scientist and not a public relations person. And but I really believe that the scientific community needs to get, and environmentalists, I think where we're falling short. I truly believe that why we're falling short here in the environmental community, there's a lot of great things going on, but we haven't worked hard enough to educate the public. Because you had something like, and we had this climate gate issue during the Copenhagen, the leaked emails, and this was a well-orchestrated campaign, really well-timed and extremely effective. And if you looked at the polls, prior to Copenhagen, we had 40% of the people in the United States doubted climate. Within 3 weeks, 60% of them doubted climate. And that's because of an extremely effective PR relation campaign that's funded with a lot of money. That's really hard in our education and scientific community do it. But yes, we need to get more facts out, because they're eroding our credibility is what they do. That's the strategy. That's what they did cigarettes, and that's what they did in the Clean Air Act. And they're extremely effective in eroding science. So if you're defending science, it's almost like you're some activist or something. I mean, science is science. It's there as a scientific method. And but we do have to get more involved quickly. I think that's our shortfall in public education. If the public was a little more educated, you wouldn't be out of whipsaw back and forth 40 to 60%. And so we as educators into this conference, I mean, we're right at ground zero, I think, here of the education direction that we need to go. But above all, I wouldn't be discouraged. Discouragement doesn't do you anything. I mean, negative energy, it's very human to put our heads in the sand when we're against the overwhelming odds. But what we do, like, and when we crossed Antarctica, which was an incredible, tough experience, we always said if we were one straw, we'd be blown over the wind, but we were 6 straws and we stayed together, and we were strong and we were able to do it. So the way to do this is really like-mindedness and collectively act, and that's where you get your support if you're out there alone. And sometimes we are out there alone, and that's the way it is sometimes. But really going about this in a real thoughtful but an urgent way, without the panic, and with the good energy, and we'll do this. Thank you very much. And Reed, it was an honor.
So in case you might have been wondering, but I'm sure you really weren't, why we launched this summit with Will Steger, he certainly is the embodiment of thinking outside of the box. His toolkit's a dog sled. His issues were bringing real nature to virtual nature through his internet. Just a fabulous case study of how some effective education about climate change can be broadcast in a different fashion. And I think you already gave us one conversation, Will, and thanks to that question. Maybe we need to retrain scientists. Maybe 5% of every scientist's responsibility should be learning how to effectively communicate. That's a big issue right now, and not a lot of dues to pay to probably make a huge difference. So I hope you'll bring that up a little later. So Will be up front to answer more questions and sign books during the break. I just wanted to ask the panelists for the next session to come up to the front before you go to the toilet, if you possibly can. And also wanted to just, let's see, remind you that we'll have till probably about 20 after, a little bit of extra time, but get some coffee, rev yourselves up, and get a little exercise, blood circulating, because we want to have you come back engaged to ask questions for our first panel, and we'll give you the ground rules at 10:20. Thank you.
I will try to go back and forth. I don't know if I'm hoping that they don't take I have